man, I'll tell you what. I've been getting big into these interrogations lately. Now, personally, I don't care. I'm not of the type to to say defund the police. I personally think they've always served a purpose in town, certainly. So, I want to talk about regional numbers and things like that. I think it's generally fairly well set up and things like that. But there's every time I've really heard about something or done something, just as a disclaimer inside of here, it's like, hey, look, I believe in paying a tax for the cops. I think it keeps people going slow on the highway, which is good. I think they keep crime down in terms of the business economics. We all like a grocery store. We'd like that grocery store to be there tomorrow, along with the farm and everything else with that kind of thing. But there are some numbers. So before we start this interrogation, it's a pretty straight interrogation. I've been watching a couple of them today. I just got done with a 2-hour interrogation of this guy that was from Florida, wound up trying to scam some old people out of money from Chase Bank with his wife. The wife and him got issues. They're selling drugs on the side, or he's trying to lie and say it was about a drug deal or something and getting the money back. And eventually, he never cracked on the interrogation, but one way or another, he did offer up the information to solicitation to murder, which is still a 30-year sentence in Florida as far as what it is. And let me be honest with you. I mean, for lots of reasons, you need an attorney with you right off the hop. Just let me begin. Why don't they provide you with an attorney off this? If you can't schedule an interrogation with an attorney in there, or at least be able to build an attorney to reference the situation from here, we got to work on something about that. I think it'd be the law across the board to do what this is. I don't think, why would a lawyer stop a murder from being found out? I think that would be a reasonable suspect or reasonable cause to potentially fire them, sue them, even charge them potentially with a crime if they did that. Even make sure that it's steep on that the investigators have to use what is really the legal precedence on whatever it is. And I mean, do you understand your rights? Well, how can they understand their rights if there really isn't a lawyer there? That would be my first thing with it. I want to be fair about what that is. As soon as they come in, you got to just ask for a lawyer. Why pull them in? They're just going to sit you in custody. You should sit in county jail until that day comes up. There's going to be an attorney there every day anyways, coming through these kinds of interrogations to sit down and do this kind of material. Otherwise we need more court-appointed lawyers just as a roster for it, so you would begin to develop training into doing that kind of stuff, so that way we can actually have something there. I know it would be nice in Hancock because it's a nice little small town, but I'm sure they have a busy case log. I'd imagine, I don't know if this is a city. I really couldn't build off of the information, but it seems like these kids are walking around, 7-Eleven in town. So I'm assuming that it's a little bit busier than my sleepy little town. But this kid's 13 years old, and there more than anything, I just wanted to talk about this real quickly here. Now, I'm from the worker model. It's not like, I know I'm a snowflake compared to you kid, but inside here, this attorney, by the way, or this prosecutor, by the way, he's about as snowflake as they get here.
Amari, I'm Dave. I'm the investigator that's been up all night, just like you.
Okay, so let's begin. When it comes to the interrogator, I don't care. It's an interrogator. They all have the same purpose. They have to figure out information, and they're going to do what is necessary. I would do it, and hopefully you'd understand. You clocked in, kid. You got to get grades in school. Same deal. You got to ask questions, get information. So beyond that, and I think the interrogator here did an amazing job. Other than, again, what I stated earlier about, look, the first thing I should advise you is you need an attorney. Why I need your opinion to why you should want one, that I have to almost force you to get one, is kind of crazy. Why cut the chase? Eventually 90% of them are going to do it anyways. This is an oddity out of the situation. Come on. And I don't know when this was, but this was premiered just very recently, almost a couple of weeks ago or something like that. So, when the actual date on that was, I might have missed it in the beginning, or they didn't necessarily give the year. But the largest note inside here was, all right. So the judge, he winds up the kid takes a plea deal. He says that the guy come at him, bullying him. This 25-year-old been doing it for a good long little while. I believe it. I believe it, but at the end of the material, there's a whole lot of holes and situational things that I'm not about to get into and argue with the situational model. But in here, the kid takes a plea deal somewheres for, this manslaughter. The family of the guy that was killed, maximum sentence of 30 years. That's first degree manslaughter, which the same sentence as soliciting of murder in Florida of the one girl that we were watching there that tried to have her husband killed, from the other day when I was posting the video. Okay, second degree murder is going to be up in that window, and generally determining how violent you ran, you didn't call the cops. I could see it cranking up into that. It makes it harder, a lot more work. It's a cost. That's a whole bunch of things. But eventually he takes a plea deal. Somewhere's in here he took a plea deal for not manslaughter. It started with a B. I forget what it was. Oh, I have to read it out here again. Talk about his dad. Well, anyways, I forget exactly what the term was. It did say it somewhere's in here. Well, at any rate, it said something about him getting 8 years from the defense attorney, but then the judge turned it up. However, yeah, 8 years as part of the plea bargain. The prosecutors were only asking for 8 years. The prosecutors were only asking for 8 years as part of the plea deal or plea bargain. However, the judge went further, handing down a 12-year sentence. That is very, very odd to me, firstly off the hop. With credits for a year, he had been in custody. So he winds up getting 11 years. So this kid's 13 years old. This is the main point of what I'm thinking about. 13 years old, maybe 14. Let's say he's getting close to his birthday. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. He would have been 22 years when he got out. The judge turned that into 23, 24, 25, 26. Now, what did we do for society in this case? I mean, at least at 21 years old, after being in prison that long, tried as an adult, he's going to develop no work skills. At 13 years old, he's going to be out of school. He's still got another 5 years worth of high school to continue. And now, obviously, he can get his GED through there, but that's not the same thing as going to school every day and getting your grades. And he says he was getting an A and a B, A's and B's in school and things of that nature. So, I'm curious of that. The thing about the law is, like, you got to deal with what information you have, because for me, that's what 42 is trying to tell me. That's what that is. I'm not going to deal with prior crimes and things like that. That's going to nullify a lot of that right then and there on the board. All right, so 42, squared away with the information in the universe, and what we're going to get him for is 8 years. 8 years is a good long time. He might have stole a car, he might have shot some things, he might have been selling drugs or stopping it from happening, but none of those things really happen here in this case, and nor can he be connected directly to any of those circumstances. So what benefit, would you get? Now, like I said, I'm not quantifying this to be something that is local or anything under those natures of my personal life or anything like that. The one time I've spent a little time in the clink, and so on and so forth. Hey, I probably needed it, and I learned a lot from the situation about marijuana and in the court cases, and how the whole legal system, how the gears grind. At least is a good way to explain that. And that's I think that's beneficial from somebody's perspective. Maybe not for everybody. But somebody like me, I think that's a fair thing. I think, I was heading down some roads like that. Well, I don't know if I was really heading down a road. I wasn't a bad guy. I was doing personal grow and things like that. And of course, yeah, if I could have sold somebody, I would have sold somebody. That turns into, for me, a 5-pound bot garden. But I'm not getting into that. Let's get into, again, why there's a huge difference or disconnect between what that is and why from 8 years. What would have been sensible? All right, so he gets out when he's 21. This is a murder case, firstly. All right, so I want to be clear. This isn't premeditated, necessarily. I'm sure he thought about it quite considerably. I'm sure he did go back and get the gun, and that's why he was found guilty under the situation after review of the 7-Eleven camera and things like that. Okay, this is a kid. A 13-year-old kid. Okay, 13-year-old kid, guns, movie, TV, Hellboy, all that shit. What's heading down the pipes right now. You tag them hard. 8 years seems like that's about right. Helps with the area, with who's living in that area and situation in society. Before I talk about any kind of reform with the police and prison system in itself, not to stop that thing from happening, but actually how do we handle education through that system? How do we handle getting them trained so when they get out of jail or off of parole or probation or whatever it is, they actually get paroled through this in some way that it's useful. So 12 years, probably half of that winds up being 6 years in jail or something like that. I mean, the kid is a kid. How do you deny them parole inside of here, short of them being a horrible person in prison? But you're putting them in an environment where you're asking for trouble. The only people, they're not good people in there. We're not talking about PhDs and cum laude students and valedictorians that are going there, right? What can they possibly learn from? And the guards aren't going to necessarily be sharing secrets with them and stuff like that. You really shouldn't have that kind of relationship with what your job is inside of there. So inside here, what in the hell? What in the hell, Judge? What is going on inside of here for what the deal is about how this situation plays out and how this plays through. And like I said, I'm saying this in a very vague way. I want this to be kind of large in its model for what this kind of represents, because it plays to everybody. There really shouldn't be a person when we think about these kinds of situations. This is again, not a premeditated solicitation to have somebody killed. This is a kid that has access to systems and things in the street where you're asking them to be, to develop and grow as a young person and begin to presentate those things to the rest of the world, which is going to indefinitely come back. Where else are they going to go? A friend that they met in prison? Of course, they're going to go back to their mothers or grandmothers or aunties after this situation is done, short of having nothing to go to or wind up going to a halfway house or a situation where, unless somebody can define to me another situation that's out there that's readily available to everybody to use, I mean, you can kind of see the long game end on what this is. What benefit do we as a society share by allowing this kind of thing to have happen? All right, so even 4 years. I mean, the human body, the human nature. I put this snowflake in there, in prison for whatever they did. They ran a stoplight and they had it at with them. It's going to be within very short order, even inside of a year. I feel that this was not fun. This is not a situation I want to repeat again, let alone, what the long game is. I think murder is a very, very strong situation that comes into it. But no matter what we're doing, we're not giving this kid the death penalty. We're not going to be giving him life in prison for what it is, for not understanding how to properly use the situation at hand. I mean, what good positive references outside of his mother or father or anything like that that you'll read in here? I just don't care about any of that directly at this point in time in the way I'm specifying this information. What positive situations in terms of the reform of whatever access of information that we have to for case studies would reference a positive criteria to what the beneficial nature of this system would represent? Because that's what we want to idealize. We want that result, and we want, as judges, lawyers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and other things of that nature, to represent a positive goal. Because then it's worth whatever money. It's worth whatever tax dollars in the end game for what it is we do here. Because we want to make sure that, hey, the kid, he come through. We made sure he increased his education. We wanted to make sure through the prison system that they had access to classes that actually define them to get a high school diploma. We want to be able to pick up right off of their class from their last grade of the Common Core and pay somebody to do that. We want to collect that tax dollar from that. I want to pay that as an American taxpayer through this system to make sure that I'm going to get something back after this reform system is done. And I want to make sure that any business or any place that this guy goes to, that's going to properly be reflected into what gets back inside of here. The case was done. You are innocent until proven guilty, and once your case is done, it's supposed to be that it is identified that you did those things. You might have to make security analyses, and you might be even denied from certain privileges or systems. But once you have those jobs, we want to make sure that the proper raises and promotions are still going to be available for a person of this nature, to make sure that we're not going to be dealing with harassment standards later or anything else. It just creates too much drag on the system. It just creates too many bad problems and influx on the model to rationalize the cost on what that is. I mean, I couldn't fathom what that would represent inside here. Until when you say something like that, some really nasty, gnarly stuff starts going through the ear in terms of the who, what, when, where with it all. And firstly, I don't know if there would be standards for the judge to get something out of this. I kind of doubt it. But you know what I mean. You would have to start going through the nuts and bolts on this. Is it when it comes to the prison system itself? How are we making sure? I mean, obviously, this kid being 13 years old, we punish them. We want to get them out. That's not what we want. That is not an alpha male trophy kind of target that we should be idealizing to take up those kinds of cages inside of these situations where it would be sensible and beneficial. Because then, hey, the cops go out and get it, great. Get it, good job, goes on the system and defends on what those systems are. Great job, prosecutors and defense team and legal system as a whole. I think we did the right thing. Do I think that inside here we're going to have a lull in terms of the housing in this system, where eventually it just, is it a roster with probation and how much probation time we have, or systems of like, well, the judge finally said what it's over, or now we have enough slots in terms of probation for what this represents that now we can take that on. I don't know. Have you seen probation in the city? Or parole? I'd have to argue the results as an end game. And I mean, what happens when they violate that anyways? All right, so they're off parole, they go right back into jail, and then I gotta catch up to try to figure out who's the next person in or the next person out. Those would be the kind of things I would be looking for in terms of internal affairs or some kind of investigation into that department or whatever value comes into it. Which I say, I think Hancock's got a good ratio on what it does. I don't really see him doing too much of it. It's not like you get too many people in the meat grinder over there. At least when I was in there, I didn't really necessarily see anybody that didn't have it coming, short of me. And again, as a pot grower for my own personal pot grow on my own property, yeah, it's kind of fluff stuff, really, honestly, in terms of what what it is. But I did get a good view, a good interpretation, a spectrum of what was going on in there. I'll be honest, there's a lot of intelligence problems, there's a lot of mental mental disabilities, which they're not doing anything to increase that. The mental health and the drug and alcohol, at least for the representation of what was there. Hey, I remember who they had there for mental health. They made me talk to them for an evaluation after drug and alcohol. I know lots of guys who had to go through that. Guys I've worked with in the stone mill. And you want to ask me which guy I feel safer with working with in the stone mill. It sure as shit wouldn't have been that mental health or drug and alcohol coaches is what it was. Now again, the drug and alcohol coaches were generally a little bit smarter than the mental health that I was dealing with down there. But you just can't take a PhD at face value. You can't. You can't take a mental health a psychology degree or economics degree at face value. I think that's a horrible way to. I mean, profiling can work against you. Momentum can be a very cruel mistress if you're not careful with that type of material. So I wanted to bring up those kinds of standpoints, and I encourage you to kind of watch this case. I think again, this investigator did a fairly good job, short of what happened. But the kid, he offered to give up the information. The mother being in there with him didn't really just choose to make the association with the attorney right off the hop. And these are things that I want you to pay attention to. These are things that I want you to, be around your scenarios and things. But you shouldn't, bag on this guy for it. You shouldn't put that on a street officer for what that is. I think that has an anti-up situation to the material as well. Some of this stuff they already know. They're just asking fundamentals on some of the material. Cut the brass tacks. Just get right to it. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about what's going on. I know you're trying to build a rapport for what that is. You got to read the situation. You got to be able to play the field inside, hear what that is. He's a minor. There should be some kind of parental guardian or legal counsel with this kid right off the hop. We're talking about a day in the difference inside of here, which makes this weird, especially considering what happened here. That is so odd to me. Just like, whoa, So as an example, I'll throw up another one I just did here. Hopefully I haven't run too long on the information. Here we go. So this has a lot of solicitation to murder as a function of double murder. A double murder has aspects of fraud on an elderly couple, insider information from Chase Bank, and the ways to kind of cover up that information. And as you go through it, he never really confessed to going to do double murder. He was more explaining it as a solicitation of murder, which definitely puts him down. Regardless, I think these guys as interrogators did an amazing job. This guy isn't an adult, and at no point in time in here did he ask for legal counsel. That is something that is, it kind of blows your mind. But as you kind of learn through a lot of these interrogations, that people want to try to defend themselves. They want to make sure that they can clarify this. When an innocent person is like, whoa, you are asking me all kinds of questions that are weird. I'd like an attorney, please. Stop this interrogation or going on. Hey, and I'm not saying just do that. If you think that, hey, whoa, I'm happy to clarify what's going on inside here. But, that should be absolutely fine to talk to one of those attorneys. Somebody in this kind of situation would be very different, and they would act very differently in terms of what they're going to do and what they're going to try to say. And, you're going to try to pick apart that lie the best you can. An incident report, from the stone mill is going to be very different. The gravity works very differently in there, but they are parallel. The gravity outside in the real world with cameras, situational ways to check and guarantee information work in a lot of the same way, but they don't have quite the mechanical gravity, the quantum gravity that goes into something quite like stoma. You broke something, you stole something, you're out of place where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. A lot of real world circumstances have all kinds of variances in them, and diversified inconsistency to why somebody does what they want to do in freedom, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are guilty or innocent of anything inside of there. And those are kind of things I want you guys to understand, at least if you're in here trying to understand who I am, and why I think that this is absolutely fascinating material. So I encourage you to go watch. Catch you on the next one. It's a brutal one. It's a brutally long, kind of dry. He's a snowflake for sure. But the investigator makes it pretty. This is like your classic good cop, bad cop scenario where you're watching one cop go from good cop to bad cop, side with them, turn on them, turn up the pressure, back it back down, and something as a parent or somebody who has to do these kinds of things from a supervisor's position may be relative to worth the time to pay attention to and understand. So, catch you on the next one.